Today there's just one new anime that came out, and that is Lord L. Meloy II's Case Files. All I knew about this one going in was that it is another Fate anime, and I have a pretty sordid relationship with the Fate franchise. I think that a lot of it is overhyped and boring, and that I think that the lore has become such a clusterfuck that a lot of the newer Fate incarnations are just impossible to follow if you don't already have like a great wealth of knowledge of the franchise. I was kind of worried this was going to be the same story, but it's really not. In fact, it's a direct sequel to the one part of the Fate story that I actually do like a lot, which is Fate Zero. Yeah, I'm one of those guys who just likes Fate Zero, and I don't really like any of the rest of it. But I do like Fate Zero quite a bit, and of course, everybody's favorite characters from Fate Zero are Waver Velvet and Iskander. If you know the plot of Fate Zero, I mean, I'm going to spoil Fate Zero in this discussion. Like, you can't even talk about this show without spoiling Fate Zero. Should you watch this show if you haven't seen that one? I would say it seems like it's going to have a pretty different tone. It's kind of more of a fun adventure show, at least going by this first episode. I don't know how serious or how dark. I mean, I'm sure it will get pretty dark and serious, but I don't know if it's going to go for the same storytelling style. If anything, I think there's a high possibility that this show could be even better than Fate Zero in terms of pacing, story structure. It's not beholden to the whole Holy Grail War thing, which I personally think it inevitably invites a kind of lackluster story structure. So on the one hand, yeah, you could probably watch this without having watched that. On the other hand, why would you? Fate Zero is a good show, so just go watch it. It's 24 episodes. It won't take you that long. You can do it in a day. Just go watch it. It's good. Everybody, it's critically acclaimed. It's a direct prequel to this show. You will probably get a lot more out of it if you watch it. So, with that said, if you haven't seen Fate Zero and you don't care about spoilers, then continue with this video. So the very first thing we see in this show is a recreation of the final battle between Iskander and Gilgamesh that happened at the end of Fate Zero. Of course, we know that Iskander dies there, and, but Waver gets to live on, and he's sort of taken in the lessons that he learned from Iskander. He's become a better man, and, going into the future, he can continue his adventures. That's exactly what this show is. If you always wanted to know what kind of man Waver would become taking in the lessons he learned from Iskander, this show seeks to answer that exact question. It's kind of fan service of the highest order. It's like the fan service you actually wanted as a fan of Fate Zero. Waver continuing his adventure, becoming a better person, and also a better mage. And so the plot of this first episode is basically just to set up what position Waver's going to be in for the rest of the show. We have a framing device where he's been captured by this lolly girl who's super adorable, who is, I guess, the little sister of Kenneth L. Meloy, who was, Waver's teacher from the original show, who he sort of betrayed in order to get into the Holy Grail War. Kenneth and his wife died. Waver blames himself for that death. But what this little sister really wants from Waver, will not be revealed until after he's told her the story of how it is that he came to manage the class of the El Meloy magician. So, he's become the new instructor, so to speak, of this class of mages. And so he tells the story, which is basically a fun little adventure story about him going to the ruins of Babylon, ending up meeting an old friend who had funded his trip to Japan in the first place to participate in the Holy Grail War. They stop some bad mages from doing some bad shit. It's a pretty fun story, but the ultimate point of it all is that once she's heard this story and confirmed that he is, I guess, who she thinks he is, she asks him to become the new Lord El Meloy, because she is currently the Lord, but she's too young to really do it, so she wants to pass off the responsibility onto him. He, of course, wants to take this responsibility because he feels like it's his fault that Kenneth died. So, yeah, it's a pretty solid idea for a sequel to Fate Zero. I think this flows naturally from Waver's character. I think that, it's exciting to see him grown up. with long hair. He's now like an older pretty boy. He's much more like duty driven. You can tell he's changed a lot, but in a way that kind of makes sense. And he still has a lot of his former traits. He's still kind of hot-headed, prideful. He's still got that wimpy-ass voice, which in the backstory scene that takes up most of this episode, he sounds more childish. It seems like he's going to have more of an adult-sounding voice going forward, which I'm happy for, because it was, like, his voice is obnoxious. But, I thought that this was, aside from making me feel like, oh, wow, I didn't know I wanted this. Like, I actually do kind of want to know what happens to Waver later. And I felt like the excuse was good, but also just the show is really fucking well made. So this is being handled by Troika. So if you don't know, Fate Zero was directed by A. Aoki, who, was working with Ufotable at the time. And apparently, I hadn't even realized that this was how Troika got started, but he was one of the 3 co-founders of Troika Studio back in 2014. They've produced Recreators, Beautiful Bones, which has the same director as this new show, and some other stuff. Their shows are generally pretty well produced, very pretty. They tend to be big, kind of hype beast shows, so this falls in line with what they've been doing. So, it's the director of Fate Zero's studio who is making this new show. And I would say that it might be visually, I don't know if it's the most impressive Fate show yet, but I think it's the most aesthetically pleasing. Personally, even though I thought that Unlimited Blade Works had really phenomenal animation, and Fate Zero for that matter, the way Ufotable continually would rework the character designs of the Fate franchise, I was not a fan of. I thought Fate Zero was already kind of on the way towards the weird shovel faces, and UBW really drove it in. And like, the post-processing effects, while very pretty, got to be almost distracting. Like, I was paying more attention to the visual effects than to what's happening in the scenes. This episode, the character designs are some of the best they've ever looked in the Fate series. Facial expressions are very detailed, nuanced. There's tons of just different expressions. I loved the way that the girls' faces looked in particular. They're just animated to a degree that I don't think Ufotable ever really did with the designs. So, just amazing animation direction all across the board. Some lit fight scenes, action scenes. Well, not really any fights, but there's some cool effects animation during the later part of the episode when, shit starts going crazy. People die. It's not really overly grimdark in the way that Fate Zero was. Not that I'm complaining about that. I love that aspect of Fate Zero, but, this one feels a little bit more lighthearted, at least so far. And yeah, just the tone of it, the visual style, all of it was very appealing. Of course, Yuki Kajiura has been brought back to do the soundtrack once again. It's fantastic. I would say, like, I'm not usually as much a fan of Kajiura's work that is, like, more orchestral and has less of her, like, synth work and, the way that her earlier stuff sounded, like Boogie Pop or Dot Hack, but there was some pretty fucking great songs towards, like, especially the one that closes out the episode was pretty epic. I mean, her tracks did definitely make a lot of big scenes in Fate Zero, and that will definitely be true in this show as well. So, production-wise, I have no complaints. I thought the episode was paced very well. The writing was a little bit awkward just because there was so much exposition that had to be done and so many, like, reintroductions of characters. People, like, literally saying, like, yeah, I'm, that guy, your friend from back then, like, just to jog your memory, which worked. It made me go, oh yeah, I guess there was a friend character. Oh yeah, the Lords. Like, the fact that I'm able to talk about this episode as though I knew what was going on is only because they had re-explained things. And I could tell they were trying to do it in a way where it wouldn't be too annoying to people who watched Fate Zero. They're not re-explaining the whole Holy Grail War conceit, because honestly, it doesn't matter that much to the story going forward. But, like, they explained the things you need to know in such a way that I think new viewers would be able to pick up and go. But again, like, you might as well watch Fate Zero. Nothing's stopping you. Get it done before the next episode comes out. But yeah, So aside from the dialogue being awkward in places, I did enjoy the sort of cheekiness of some of it. It felt very like old school light novel. It felt almost like Nisi-Oisin-esque, the way that characters kind of rib at each other, and the particularly the Lolly character having such a like domineering attitude, but there's little slips in where you realize that like it's clear that she's just kind of messing with Waver. Like she's not really gonna kill him. Like she's planning to ask him to do something that she doesn't even expect him to accept. She thinks there's a chance that he will just kind of walk away, but he just kind of accepts the responsibility, not out of fear of the consequences, but just because he legitimately feels responsible. So like, you know, I thought that was an interesting dynamic to go on in that conversation. So yeah, there's some good writing in there, in spite of the fact that there's also some really fucking exposition heavy on the nose stuff. Overall, I'm surprised. I enjoyed it way more than I was expecting to. It kind of felt like, wow, this is like rekindling the excitement I had for Fate Zero, but I honestly think there's a lot of reasons that I would like this one even more. I feel like the tone of the storytelling, the fact that we're fixating on one character and their evolution, and using there's a lot of Fate lore that, you know, is brought up and that is used in the story, but it's not like lore dumping. It's not like characters sitting around having 3-minute conversations, you know, in the same way that it was before. I don't know where it'll go from here, but so far I think there's a lot of potential in this to be an even more, maybe not as memorable or as great as Fate Zero, but perhaps more rewatchable, more of a fun time, the good kind of fan service, you know. And I'm also excited because I guess Waver's gonna have this cute little silver-haired girl as his apprentice. So, you know, I want to know what their character dynamic's going to be like as well, because that'll probably be a big part in making or breaking the experience going forward. We'll see what happens, and I'll see you in the next one after you've become a patron and unlocked the countless hours of content that you get exclusively for being one, as well as buying one of my t-shirts that are still for sale as of this recording. Who knows if they'll be sold out by the time you actually even watch this video, but I'm recording it at 3:41 p.m. on the 6th, so they're still available at that time. I'll see you in the next one.